This is part two of a video tutorial series called Making the War-Sloth. In this video, we're going to take a look at using the Move tool, as you see we're currently doing, to nudge around vertices on the very low poly model that we created in part one. I use the Move tool with symmetry turned on across the x-axis because it really allows me to make sure that before I even start sculpting, and you'll see I'm down at that level 1 right now, before I even start sculpting, I need to make some changes to the silhouette. And using my background image, which I'd previously cropped and filled, I can start to see some of those ideas. Now I'm using sort of rough guidelines that I have in my head when doing this for creating the form, but if you feel like having a drawn out plan for this as well, never hurts. Maybe you can crop and fill multiple images to the background, but I'm just working with the side. Looking here, I'm kind of noticing the prominence of the lower jaw and how the upper jaw juts out a little bit. I also want to move in the side of the head ever so slightly and pull out that nose. I'm going to move the jawline down. I find that we really need to kind of crease that jawline a bit. So by moving it down and then pulling those vertices backwards and tucking the line in behind it, I can really start to create that shading crease that you see on the drawing, even in the low poly model. Switch to a little bit larger brush size now so I can control a couple more vertices inside the brush. And I'm just going to continue tweaking my arms till I have a setting that I going to nudge these points around a little bit to build out my sloth's trapezius, essentially. I'm working with a slightly imagined anatomy because this is a somewhat cartoony character. And, of course, it has a fantasy element to it as well. So I have a little bit of liberty I can take in creating this. But I do want to keep it fairly realistic to animal anatomy. And, again, since it's sort of an upright creature, I'm going to work a little bit off of human anatomy as well. I've switched now to the standard brush, and I've gone up one more resolution level of detail, and now I can start doing a little bit of sculpting, just to, again, get some of those more major forms. I'm not looking at any details. I'm really just looking at where I can create shading creases. So pulling out the ears a little bit, defining the jawline, working those pectoral muscles and here the back of the skull a little bit, and across the neck. That's really going to help me get the changes I need to start to develop this form. And examine the nose a little bit more. We'll definitely need to pull that out as we continue working. And with the Move tool, Move brush, it's the Draw tool, Move brush, I can start to define that upper and lower jaw a little bit by pulling them out to be ever so much more prominent. Kind of got a little goofy smile right now, but that's cool. I'm also looking at the shading crease along the cheek, and I'm going to try and achieve that using the Move tool as well by moving just a few of those points forward with a very small Move brush setting. I can really start to define that line pretty easily. Working on the chest just a little bit, again moving points forward and backwards. Here we're starting to define how the pectoral muscle and deltoids start to stretch out onto the arm. And again, all I'm looking at is the major sort of shading creases and silhouette changes that need to be made to take what was a very sort of simple form a few minutes back and get it looking like the outline we see in the drawing. Doing a little work defining the calves here as well. Then I'm going to use the Move brush and pull the tip of the tail back a little bit. This is going to allow me a much more pointed look to kind of help out with my silhouette. It's a little bit longer than my drawing, but I think that's going to work pretty nicely still. going to make a few more alterations to the form here using the Move brush. And that'll actually wrap up part 2 of this video series. In part 3, we're going to take a slightly more sculpted form, which I jumped ahead on a little bit, and we're going to continue to resolve that using a couple of the sculpting brushes. So this has been part 2. Please take a look at part 3 of the video series coming up next.